Okay, so the next two problems we're going to do are going to be about area. So we have a picture that has a height that is 4 thirds times its width. It is to be enlarged to have an area of 192 square inches. What are the dimensions of the enlargement? So when we enlarge a picture, we want to keep its proportions the same. So we're going to call this the width, and we're going to call this the height. And the height is equal to 4 thirds of the width. So we're going to enlarge it so it has a total area of 192 inches squared. Okay, but we want to keep that proportion the same. So I know that area is equal to the height times the width. You might say base times height, length times width, but it's pretty much all the same. Okay, so now if I have an area and I know the height is 4 thirds the width, then I can replace one of these letters and create an equation with just two variables instead of three. Now again, we're keeping the proportions. I want the area to be 192 square inches. So the trick with this problem, or not the trick, is to realize that it's a little bit more straightforward than we think. Okay, so I'm going to solve that for w squared by multiplying each side by 3. Okay, so 3 times 192, 576. Oops. Divide by 4. I get 144. Now, typically when we have a number equal to a square, we take the square root. And you guys are used to doing a positive and negative answer. So square root of 144 is the positive or negative value of 12. Okay, since this is area, negative doesn't make sense. So we're only going to take the positive 12. So the width is 12 inches. To find our height, we're going to go 4 thirds times 12. So that's 48 divided by 3, which is 16 inches. Okay, so the new dimensions of my picture are 12 by 16 inches. Okay, all right. Again, this is an area problem. All right, now the next area problem we're going to do is kind of a classic problem. It has to do with a garden and a walkway. This problem occurs in pretty much every math textbook I've ever seen in one form or another. So let's go ahead and tackle that one. All right. A garden measuring 12 by 16 meters is to have a pedestrian pathway around it, increasing the total area to 285 square meters. What will be the width of the pathway? So the inner rectangle is our garden. So we know that's 12 by 16. Now we're going to put a pathway around it. We don't know how wide that pathway is. So we're going to call that width X. Okay. All right. So if I take the garden with the pathway, the height of it becomes 16 plus x, because on each side you have that width of the pathway. Okay. Or make it simpler, 16 plus 2x. Same thing happens for your base or your width of your garden and its pathway. We have our 12, and then we have an X on the left and an X on the right. Okay, now these new dimensions create an area of 285 square meters. So we know the area of a rectangle is length times width or base times height. Okay, we're going to go length times width. All right, here we go. So our new area is 285 square meters. Our new length is 16 times 2, or plus 2x, excuse me. And then our new width is 12 plus 2x. Okay, now we're going to multiply that through to see what we get. So using the distributive property, I get 192 plus 32x plus 24x plus 4x squared. We're going to combine like terms. Okay, now since we have to solve the quadratic for x because we want to find out the width of that pathway, we're going to set it equal to 0 and solve. So I'm going to move my 285 over to the other side, and I'm going to get this. So 192 minus 285, negative 93, plus 56x plus 4x squared equals 0. Okay, so that's written kind of backwards, so let me rewrite it. Oops. Like that. All right, so you have two options here, or a couple of options actually. You can graph it into Desmos and figure out where, the width of the pathway. We can solve it by hand, which would require probably the quadratic formula. But the first thing that I would notice is that 4, 6, and 96 are all divisible by 4. So if we divide by 4, this is going to make our equation a little bit easier to deal with. Like that. Just made our numbers a little bit smaller. Okay, I personally cannot think of any two numbers that will multiply to a negative 24 and add to give me a 14. So that tells me quadratic formula. So negative b plus or minus b squared minus 4 times a times a c all over 2 times a. All right. So if I do that, I'm going to use my calculator. I get negative 14 plus or minus the square root of 292 all over 2. Simplifying that, I get 1.54 and negative 15.54. Well, again, since this is a length, you don't really want a negative value. It doesn't make any sense. So x is equal to about 1.5. Now remember, that is the width of your walkway. Okay, so after getting your garden, putting the walkway around it, the width of your walkway is 1.5 meters to achieve an area of 285 square meters total. All right, so next up, we're going to work on a volume problem, and that will be posted shortly.